Here I am, just a man sitting in his kitchen, drinking a cup of tea, talking about Jiu Jitsu. Recently I saw a video on YouTube on this very channel where, not this channel, this platform, where Keenan Cornelius seems to be back on the scene a little bit in some small capacity, and he was talking about some stuff. And I was remembering when Keenan did another video talking about how Jiu Jitsu had evolved so much over the last sort of 10, 15, 20 years that the black belts of yore would get smashed by the purple belts, maybe even the blue belts of today. And at the time I didn't really feel that that was exactly true. I couldn't express to myself why. This was some years ago. This is before I have the wisdom and the insight, the Jiu-Jitsu insight that I now possess. And I'm finally able to clarify and crystallize for myself why I think Keenan is wrong in that assertion. Now, we can talk about the leg lock craze that has already kind of swept the Jiu-Jitsu grappling community, and it's perhaps that wave is now receding a little bit. But 20 years ago, Jiu-Jitsu was far more a combat system, a fighting art, than it is today. Today it's more, at least in terms of how widely it's practiced, it's more about the sport, the sportive element. So Keenan's really talking about two very different things. And I would still contend that leg locking, heel hooking and all that kind of stuff, certainly in the street and even in an MMA context, is not generally great practice. It's certainly an option, but it's not a go-to. And this is for the reason simply that you leave yourself incredibly vulnerable to getting knocked out when you're on your back with someone standing over you, as we've seen demonstrated beautifully by Gary Tonin and Ryan Hall, two incredible exponents of the heel hooking art. They both got clipped, knocked out, knocked silly in a few of their fights not that long ago. A couple of their fights not that long ago. Anyway, so has Jiu-Jitsu evolved? Well, the way I see it, again, the leg locking thing aside, the way I see it is Jiu-Jitsu has gotten more complicated. It's gotten more fancy schmancy. There's a lot more moving parts to many of the techniques, and the techniques have evolved, and they've basically become far more complicated than they used to be. And they weren't that complicated before, because when you're in a fight, it's very simple, basic things of what you're going to, if you know what you're doing, or what you're going to rely upon. Finesse, complicated technical systems, they kind of go out the window when it's a life and death situation on the street, or when it's potentially a life and death situation inside a cage. Simple is best. Simple and effective is best. So Jiu-Jitsu has gotten more complicated. Has it gotten better? Has it evolved in a positive way? I don't think it has. Complicated doesn't necessarily mean better. Let's look at, and this is perhaps a bit of a stretch, but I'm sure there are some fellow Luddites out there who will rally to my cause. Let's look at technology in the world at large. We all have an iPhone in our pocket. We'll have unlimited access to vastly powerful computer systems. Life has gotten better because of computer systems, no doubt, but there is a tipping point that I think we're on the other side of now in terms of the quality of life. It's undeniable that all this access to technology, social media, is essentially rotting our brains, rotting our ability to concentrate, rotting our ability to communicate, rotting our ability to emotionally regulate. So just because technology has advanced, it doesn't mean that the quality of a person's life has gotten better. We spend so much time on our phones that we're losing the ability to communicate with the people sitting right next to us. And this is a very real thing. There's lots of studies to demonstrate that these life skills are being eroded out from under us. I would argue that there is a similar thing going on in Jiu Jitsu. Jiu Jitsu, as I say, has become more complicated, but I don't think it's become better or more effective. Keenan, to go back to Keenan Cornelius, now I rate Keenan, he's a great sport practitioner. And there was a video that Keenan did some years ago where he talked about how the traditional method of opening the closed guard is bullshit and doesn't work. And he never uses it, and it never works for him, and he doesn't teach it and all this kind of stuff. Well, of course he doesn't teach it, because he doesn't know how to do it properly. His demonstration was, and again, with all due respect to Keenan, his demonstration of the technique was inherently flawed. Henry Akins then came along and did his own video pointing out, as nicely as he could, credit to Henry Akins, pointing out where Keenan had missed some of the vital components of this very fundamental jiu-jitsu technique and why the technique is still as powerful as it ever was. So my point in mentioning this is that Keenan is a guy who understands all the sort of complexities and the nuance of the worm guard and all these newfangled, complicated, intricate, amazing, fun systems. But I think he perhaps doesn't understand the nuance and the depth of fundamental techniques. He doesn't understand things like weight distribution, angles, and it's my contention that the fundamental techniques, when applied with these fundamental concepts to back them up, weight distribution, angles, base, all this other stuff, can and still does smash through all of the complicated jiu-jitsu tomfoolery that has been developed in the last 10, 15, 20 years. If you understand how to use your weight to pass, and we're seeing Gordon Ryan using this method of passing in all his recent matches, he's just using weight distribution and angles. If you understand how to use weight distribution and angles, which is what old school Brazilians, old school Gracie Jiu-Jitsu practitioners, that's all they use. But if you know how to use these things, these fundamental concepts, you don't need to understand 1,000 different ways to pass the guard. But you do now have the ability to pass any guard. And it's the understanding of these concepts that seems to have fallen by the wayside from my perspective. So just because a person's jiu-jitsu is complex, complicated, doesn't mean it's effective. Effective in the street, effective in the cage, or even effective in the tournament setting, in the jiu-jitsu tournament setting. So I suspect that these purple belts, the purple belts of today with their complicated, complex jiu-jitsu, would find themselves surprised, they'd be in for a surprise, if they were to roll, even in a strictly sportive context, with the black belts of yesterday. Because the black belts of yesterday understand these fundamental and incredibly powerful concepts in a way that most practitioners today don't seem to.